we're going to start off this week with some big numbers that our writer Matt Waters recently reported on. This is when most of the big states report their numbers. So we crossed some milestones this week, Pat, with everybody reporting. We have 4 years into this, basically $10 billion in revenue from sports betting has been generated, $1.5 billion in taxes. Now, this is all the activity that we are able to track since the fall of the federal sports betting ban, PASPA, circa 2018. June is when things started getting kicked off. Of course, we had sports betting revenue in Nevada and some limited things elsewhere, but we tracked this since basically the fall of PASPA. And these are, I mean, I don't know, kind of, we usually talk about handle, but we're getting into revenue, and these are some pretty big numbers. I'm pretty sure I would have bet the under on $10 billion in revenue if we talked about this 4 years ago. But you cover some of what we do in the space in terms of covering revenue and handle. What were your thoughts on this milestone for us?
I mean, I'm much newer to the industry than you, so you're probably better to handicap that. But I guess maybe not, because you would have gone over. But I came on, started reporting on this industry as it was rocket ship, mid-pandemic, as it just started exploding. So I figured, maybe this doesn't make, this timeline made sense. New York probably helped, especially with the tax revenue there. But, at the same time, even covering some of the legislative stuff I've covered so far and seen states that maybe we thought would pass. I know a lot more. We're at 35 legal states, probably a lot quicker than most people would have said, but even now, we've seen states not pass, North Carolina and Missouri, that this year thought, well, maybe it would have happened. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe it was quicker than it could have been, but it also maybe was slower than it could have been.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I like going back to time. I was always going to be bearish on how things developed. And I was, many cold takes of mine over the years from offering my takes on this podcast and elsewhere. But I thought this whole thing was going to be much slower. That's why I would have gone under 10 billion revenue in basically 4 years. I thought we'd be at far fewer states having legalized. I thought the adoption of online betting would be much slower. When we start every year doing the podcast, I'm pretty sure we handicap how many states we think are going to legalize. And this is probably the first year where it's going to be slower. It's going to be the under on the number that, like Adam and I spitball of how many states we think are going to go live. Part of that is the shrinking map, because we saw so many states legalize in the, basically the first 3 years. So that pace is what I always come back to, is I never thought we'd see the pace of legalization. And for whatever reason, sports betting gets this pass in our general consciousness. I think that it's part of what we do. You go to Vegas, you bet on sports. If for some reason, and we're going to get into this later on too, sports betting seems as harmless. It's obviously not. It can be very addictive. It can be an addictive product for people who have problems. But the adoption and kind of getting it into the mainstream consciousness was absolutely faster than I thought would ever happen. And I think a lot of people honestly think that same way.
No, it does seem a lot quicker. But to your point, I mean, again, watching legislative stuff this year, we've seen people compare it to murder, sex trafficking, a couple other things. So, that adoption is still going uphill a little bit. And to your point, I think this revenue and tax milestone could have been sooner if mobile was quicker adopted. In some states, South Dakota, you still have to be in person at a casino in Deadwood, and so I think if mobile was there, quicker adoption, that timeline would have been expedited too. So yeah, I think the adoption of it, and like you said, we're going to be talking about some pretty fun things here in a minute, but I think some of the states are maturing pretty quick. I mean, I just wrote up an Indiana one for June, and 4% year-on-year growth for June and for handle. So, I guess operators can figure out how to make more revenue, more parlays or what have you, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of universal. I think in almost all the numbers we're seeing come out now. This is May, June, July, and then August. These are, let's make sure we say this every year. These are the slowest months for sports betting. We are in the current, today is literally the deadest day for sports gambling in the United States, right? Because there is no baseball day after the All-Star game. I don't know what you're betting on, but there's not much to bet on out there. So this comes with a caveat. Like, it's hard to pull a lot of takeaways out of this, but year on year, we're seeing, either plateauing, a little bit of pullback for May and June for a lot of states. So does this mean we're kind of done growing? I wouldn't say so. I think the NFL season was probably going to be our litmus test for see where things are going and growing. Obviously, we're going to see New York. It's for an NFL season. That should be pretty huge. One would think we'll see an influx of new bettors, I'm sure. But some of these older states, it starts making us wonder if if this 3-year timeline, or even shorter than that in some ways, is this kind of, without other factors influencing, have we kind of hit like a plateau? I don't know. Where when we first started doing this, 3, 4, 5 years is maybe kind of reaching maturity for sports betting. Now we saw, and it's different in every state, and it's hard. So these are hard things to wrap your head around, but we do have the first inkling that, with these year-over-year numbers in May and June, that we could be seeing kind of a little bit of a pullback. Now, you legalize online casino in any of these states, that could change the dynamic, because then you have cross-sell and a lot of things going on. The other interesting thing I think I saw is Illinois, we often curse because it's 2 months behind, something like that, right? In reporting, we just got the May numbers this week. And it was interesting to me that Illinois was basically just behind New Jersey for May numbers. Again, we're a month behind on that because everybody else is reporting June. But to see Illinois, which is a market that had been throttled by, we've talked about this many times, the in-person registration requirement was on, then off, then on again. And then the market basically started opening up to, you don't have... Again, if you haven't listened to this podcast, I apologize, but you've heard this before. You had to actually go to a casino to sign up for points in time for online sports betting in Illinois, and this is obviously one of the dumbest policies you could possibly create. It was meant to stop, get people into the casinos. Who cares? That's dumb. But it's interesting because Illinois has had to start and stop. It launched during the pandemic. It was like. But it has overcome all of that. It's a big state, lots of sports fans. You got Chicago, not a whole lot of drive-in from other places at this point because Indiana has legalized it as well. But it's fascinating. Illinois has kind of grown this quickly, and I'm not sure I'm going to say it's going to be number 2 in NFL season ahead of New Jersey and behind New York, but that's a possibility we're looking at. And Illinois has kind of been an also-ran for us. And you look at these numbers month in, month out, and Illinois looks like it's going to be one of the most important markets, or is already one of the most important markets in the United States.
Yeah, no, I was, I think, $2 million behind in May to New Jersey for number 2, which is astounding after seeing New Jersey just before New York just kind of dominate in that handle race, if you want to call it that, which is silly. But then you go back to the same, and I guess you could put some of Indiana's slow growth year over year on this exact thing, is maybe Illinoisans. What's their is it Illinoisans? Not going to in-person registration, but they're up 50% year over year in May. So it's like they're growing like crazy with the in-person registration requirement expired in March. And it's going bonkers. They've had a new BetMGM's new in the state, so you had some new blood coming in as well. But yeah, I mean, you've got, going back to kind of football season and seeing what kind of growth Illinois had, the in-person suspension, I guess, for a little bit too, but they'll be big in football season. Maybe not New Jersey big like you mentioned, but Arizona's got its second football season there. It's a big state. Big market that we've seen kind of, I don't want to say come out of nowhere, but much bigger than maybe a lot of people thought it would be. And then Louisiana started mostly after football season. It'll be interesting them this fall. Yeah, it's just it'll be a fun kind of summer, fall to watch.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me just that like every state is different, right? Like the micro of what a state did to legalize and the people who live there, and there's just so many factors that go into this. You can't just, it is generally aligned to total addressable market, the population of the adult population of the state, but like some states, Michigan for me stands out as, where you're from, but it seems low, right? Like when you look at the numbers every month, this is the, like, why is Michigan lower? It also has online casino. So this holistic it should kind of play off each other and like turn into a bigger market. But Michigan's like, I look at the handle numbers every month and I'm like, scratch my head, and it seems like it's a little low based on the population, the adoption, how many operators are there, things like that. So it is just super interesting as all this happens, the micro of how every state is almost a country, and it's not, you can't just draw a line and say, well, this is the biggest state, it gets the most. New York, obviously an exception, it's the biggest state. People are paying the insane 51% tax rate, paying at all costs to acquire customers, and it's different. So the last of the, we'll finish up. This is one of those micro differences. Is Virginia basically is ending unlimited promo deductions, and this is a trend that's bad for sports books. Here's a dirty little secret about the sports betting legislative industry is that most of these bills are crafted by people who like the sports books, right? These are like the lobbying went in, created. Here's some legislation. Here's pretty good. It gets tweaked in every state. Sometimes it ends up worse. Sometimes it ends up better. But like, these promo deductions are something that that the operators absolutely wanted. And this is the second instance where we saw this cut off. We're seeing this cut off, right? So Colorado already did this. Virginia, if you've been live for a year, now you can't deduct promos against revenue, and you have to pay revenue on promo dollars that you're sending off to users. Now you can still net losses and things like that. There's ways to still get benefit out of the way the law is crafted. But I'd argue that sportsbooks don't really want this to be adopted everywhere, because this is like, it means less money for the states, more money for the operators, and states are like, some of them are like expected real money out of this. And, Virginia, it's not a ton of money, but like, so Virginia's only made 33 million in taxes from launch to May of this year. And if you took away the deductions, would be up to 70 million. So that's a decent amount of money. It's not like change the budget kind of money, but when you think about that, it's a trend that I think the operators probably would like to see stop and not get adopted, especially in new states. As we look at California, Texas, they hope this model is not copied.
Yeah, well, you talk again the microcosm of different states. Louisiana has a $5 million deduction cap that states ran through in the first weekend, which was the weekend before the it was the conference championship weekend, and they've run through it. And there's 40 potential mobile slots in Louisiana, and there's 7 operators right now. And you have to wonder if that might be part of it. Is you don't have that deduction, so maybe it's not a rush there. Who knows? But just kind of looking at it that way too. Of everybody kind of thinks when you see, I know Maryland, we're talking about 60 open slots, and people say, well, there's no way you can fill it because what's the most? Colorado has, 26, something like that. Like 7 with 40 open slots, that's something. Also, again, total addressable market in Louisiana is not huge, but promos are an interesting topic.